What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Brother Bill, president of the Major Taylor Leadership Council. Hey, I'm out here getting a couple of miles in, and then I'm going back to the lab so I can edit the Major Taylor Writing in the Era of COVID-19 video. In the latter part of our seminar, we were hacked by some people that don't have the character or the all in all to be what it takes to be in Major Taylor. And so I apologize to everybody that was on the call. I had no idea. That's probably why I hate Zoom. But so we're going to edit the ignorance out of the video, and we will basically get out to everyone that wasn't able to make it the content. We got some great information yesterday from Dr. Susan Rogers, Anastasia Walker, and attorney Krishandra Guest, and they gave us great information on what we should be doing going forward in the days of COVID. I'm going to try to put a little summary together at the end. Also, a lot of the information that we are using is coming from the USA Cycling website. I'll display that link. Kudos to Major Taylor, New Jersey. We are also sharing their ride waiver. And again, you have to make the decision that's best for you. But again, we just want to give you some great information so you can make that decision, and we hope everybody has a great season. Again, I apologize for the little accident in the video, and I hope you enjoy. This is your boy, Brother Bill. See you at the end of the video.
So I try to be a respecter of people's time. So let's get started. So for those that know me or don't know me, my name is Bill Gaston, affectionately known as Brother Bill. And basically, I was the ride captain in Chicago Major Taylor Cycling Club for 2 years. And in the 2 years that I was there, our club grew from a little bit over 150 people to about 300 or close to 300 people. And so part of being a ride captain is you want to always make sure that people are safe. You want to make sure that the rides are as advertised. You want to make sure that everybody has a good time. And at the end of the day, we all start together, we all finish together. So with that being said, about this time last year, I was training to run the Chicago Marathon. Don't let this COVID weight fool you. But I was actually, running a little bit, and things were going good. And then COVID hit. And so if you know anything about marathon running in Chicago, we're looking at roughly about 40,000, 4,500 people, give or take, 45,000 people. And so I saw this article that talked about, COVID and running in COVID, and how you would basically, you could kind of be breathing the wash of people that are in front of you. And so that kind of always stayed on my mind. And so with that being said, I just kind of, like so many other people, I just sat on the couch. And so now a year has passed, and within the last year, we've come up with some new vaccines, and things are getting better. The clubs are going out riding. And so kind of the thought that hit me was that, where are we at right now? And just to kind of sum it all up, right now, people are in one of three categories. Either you have not been vaccinated, or you have had the one-shot vaccination from Johnson & Johnson, or you have either had one or two of the Pfizer or Moderna, or I think one of the other vaccines that are out. So people are in different categories. So what does that look like as we get out here and ride, considering this is what we really enjoy doing? And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. We're not here to rehash COVID and where it came from, anything like that, but we're just here to kind of talk a little bit about what it looks like when we get out here and ride. If you're like me and you see some of the pictures on the web, you'll see 5 or 6 people. You might see 2 people with a mask and 3 people without one. So what does that look like riding in a pace line? What does that look like when you stop at one of your favorite rest stops? What does that look like at the end of the ride? So, how do we just stay safe in this era of COVID? And so being the national president of the Leadership Council, I think I would be derelict in my duties if we didn't put something together so people can make an educated decision about what they want to do when they go out and ride. Clearly, one of the things that a lot of the articles that I've read and a lot of the experts are saying is that, granted, if you're working out by yourself, that's probably your best bet. But we are people of like minds and we love to be connected. And so with that being said, how do we work out together? And so that's kind of where we were going with this. And so what I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight is just kind of, some scenarios that we should kind of look at. I have some of my good friends from Chicago. They are just a wealth of information. Dr. Susan Rogers is going to talk to us a little bit about the medical side of COVID. And then my great friend, triathlete, she is one of the movers and shakers here in Chicago. I'll let her tell you more about what she does. Anastasia Walker, thank you for being here. She's going to talk a little bit about risk assessment. And, I don't get a chance to do this often, but it is a pleasure to introduce my baby sister, attorney Krishandra Gaston. And she's going to talk a little bit about the legal assessment, just kind of are there legal exposures that we should be considering as a club? And then at the end, we'll have some questions, and then we'll do a little something that I call standing around after the meeting. So even though the meeting will be over at 8, if you want to stay on and just kind of ask some questions and talk, feel free. That's what we'll do. A lot of the information that I'm presenting is coming from the USA Cycling website. The URL is below. I'm actually recording the meeting, so if there are members from your club that weren't able to make it, it'll be posted so you can share it with your clubs, and also the resources that we're using will be out there as well. So one other thing I want to throw out here just before we get started, and that is if you are a member of a Major Taylor club, I'm asking everybody to make sure that they join the All Major Taylor Strava page. And one of the things we're asking you to do is to make sure you put the initials of your Major Taylor club behind your name. If you are a member of multiple clubs, that's fine. Just make sure there's initials behind your name so we know who you belong to. So when we do the upcoming challenges and things like that, you'll be able to be a part of that, as well as I tend to post over on that side, just so things that are going on for the club as a whole, you can kind of find out where that is. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Dr. Susan Rogers, and let her tell us a little bit about the medical information.
But thanks for asking me to do this. And I've been fussing about this on rides and all. And I actually did not ride much last summer with Major Taylor or any large groups because of COVID. And I know that our guard is down a little bit. We feel a little bit more comfortable, but I still think that there's some precautions that we need to make sure we take care of. Let me just say a little bit about the vaccines. There's 3 vaccines. We've all heard about Johnson & Johnson, how that one has been taken off the market because of some side effects of blood clots. But keep in mind that the side effects from the vaccines, there were 7 or 8 people with those blood clots out of over 7 million that got the vaccine. So the risk, even with a significant side effect like that from the vaccine, is much less than the risk of getting COVID. And do not underestimate the risk of COVID infection, no matter how young and healthy you are. We've all seen the horror stories of those. Now, Pfizer and Moderna have put out the vaccine that has been, a lot of doses have been given, so much more the country is protected. And the immunity is over 90% for both of those. So it is an effective vaccine. It is not 100%, and no one is sure yet how much protection it gives you over the new variants that are found. So you're not 100% protected, so you can't put your guard down totally. Now, if you're going to get a serious side effect from the vaccine, it usually happens within 6 weeks. But keep in mind that there are some cases of people who have gotten infected after they have been vaccinated, but this is low. It's not that common, but it is still a possible risk factor. And let me just say something about herd immunity, because you've heard that term that they use, because that's the goal that they want with getting everyone vaccinated. And herd immunity is just when you've gotten enough of the population immune so that it'll be more difficult for people who aren't immune to actually be next to each other to spread the virus. And that means that because it's so easy to spread COVID, you need about 95% of the population immunized before you get enough herd immunity. So we are way far from that. That's how it is with measles. And you saw what had happened with measles. We get these horrendous outbreaks because children haven't been vaccinated as much. And so the herd immunity effect got lost. So it's our responsibility to not just for ourselves, but for everybody else that we care about, that we get a vaccine for this. The protection, how long it lasts, no one's really sure. They think maybe about 6 months, maybe a year. They're talking about whether we may need another vaccine in another year. The data just isn't there yet. So I don't have the answer for that as to how long you will remain immune from getting the vaccine, or even how long you'll be immune after you've made your own antibodies from getting infected. Let me just say too, that immunity from the infection or the vaccine is the same immunity. You just pay a much less price for getting vaccinated than getting immune by getting the disease. So to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. I'd rather get immune from the vaccine. One of the things with riding we have to remember is that, especially if you're riding hard, you're going to breathe more, which means you're going to exhale more, which means if you do carry the virus or someone else ahead of you carries the virus, you can be more exposed to it. One of the things about wearing a mask when you're biking, and you don't have to necessarily ride all that hard before the mask starts to get wet, just because of your respiratory rate. And once the mask gets wet, it's not as protective, not as effective in protecting you or the other people who are riding around you. Bring an extra mask or two when you go on rides so that you can deal with this problem. So you still should think about wearing a mask when you're riding, even if you're vaccinated, because you just don't know. One of the things I thought about too is that there's a lot of areas in this country we are well aware of where people don't want to get vaccinated. And here in Chicago, we do a lot of rides that go into Indiana. And Indiana is one of those areas that a lot of people don't want to get vaccinated. And we will often stop at a gas station to go in to get Gatorade or water. We may stop at a Starbucks. So we have to be careful about going to places like that in areas where the communities may not be vaccinated. So that's just another aspect of this that, we can't let our guard down, even though that's part of the social part of these rides, but you don't want to take extra risks with that. I don't want to I don't know if people have specific questions. You can mix and match your vaccines. You can get a Moderna, the first one, and if the next one, the only one available is Pfizer, you can do that. I wouldn't necessarily pick one over the other. I would get whatever is available, because it's not like trying to get a brand name or something that, a food or clothing. Get whatever is available for you for this, whatever they have to offer. So the other thing too, I want to make sure people understand that there is no virus particle in the vaccine. There's absolutely no way you can get COVID from the vaccine. There's a little piece of the virus that is injected, and that's what your body reacts to, and it uses that information to kill the virus when it sees that little piece again. That's what the antibody, the immunity in a nutshell, that's how it works. There is no virus, there's no way that you can get infected from the vaccine. And I think that, after you get vaccinated, still, make sure that if you're at home or around other people, wear your mask. If other people are in your home, traveling is still something I would be very careful about. Every state, every country, if you're traveling out of the country, be careful and make sure you look at those recommendations and all. And even if people are, you're meeting groups at restaurants and outside, still be careful, even if you are vaccinated, because like I said, it's not 100%, and we don't want to get cavalier. I don't know if there's any specific questions. I would still not suggest we ride in large groups. I really don't. I don't think it's the safest thing to do. I read different numbers and different things. Some people will say groups of 6, some will say groups of 10. You can't space out 6 feet if you have stoplights to stop at. It would take you forever to get across the intersection if everybody is starting 6 feet apart. So even if you may not ride that close while you're moving, eventually when you stop, you will bunch up. So we need to be careful about that. So I still am very hesitant to encourage large group rides that we all love to do. And, that's where we get to see folks and they're very social and all of that. But I don't think it's safe yet. I really don't.
Okay. Susan, so let me just throw this out here and we'll move on to our next topic. And that is some of the, like Dayton has put out that they're having their ride this year. So let's just say I'm salivating to go on a ride. What would you, as my friend, what would you tell me to do if I go to Dayton to ride? What suggestions would you give me?
Well, I would suggest you ride by yourself, even though you're in Dayton. No, I'm just saying that large rides like that are not safe. It's like going to any large group event, whether it's biking, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a big family reunion. I mean, there's no way you can socially distance. There's no way that you can ride safely, even though I know on these large rides, you may not be with a big group all the time, but at the beginning and the end, you will be. So I don't think they're good ideas yet. I think the jury really isn't out. And even though I know we have to plan these things now for the summer, I think it's a little bit, premature to do that.
Okay. Marco asked a quick question. Are there any cases or any documented cases where riders got COVID from riding?
I don't know about any specific riders because you often don't know where you got it from.
Okay.
You often don't know, but I'm sure there have been, but I haven't read a particular incident or something specific like that.
Okay. Okay. This is great information. Again, we all have to make a decision for ourselves, what you want to do. Again, the focus for this whole discussion was people are in one of 3 categories. Either you are vaccinated or you're not. And how does that look when it comes to a ride? So next up, trying to keep things moving, we're going to talk a little bit about risk assessment. And my good friend, Anastasia Walker, is going to bring us some great information. This young lady is a triathlete, and she is a part of an organization in the city. I'll let her kind of give you a little bit of her background. And I was sitting here and I was thinking about the vaccine and whatnot. And I guess in my mind, I had something kind of screwed up where I thought it was the cure. And she said, Brother Bill, it's the vaccine. It's not the cure. And it put everything in a different perspective. So without further ado, my good friend, Anastasia Walker.
You know,
Walker.
Bill, when you called me a mover and shaker, I had to kind of look around and see who you were talking about. I just want to thank you for this opportunity for me to talk about something that's really that I'm passionate about. But more importantly, being able to facilitate a vehicle to get this kind of information out and have the dialogue, because I think it's important. A lot of people either, just don't want to talk about it because they're afraid, or, they don't want to talk about it because, they're ambivalent or they're just tired of it. But I think this is a safe place where we can talk about something that is very stressful, and it's been a difficult time. My background is 25 years in public safety. I have been the chief administrative officer for the Chicago Fire Department up until last summer, and then I'm heading in a new department for the city of Chicago called the Office of Public Safety Administration, and I won't bore you with what that does actually. But when you look at riding clubs and you think about the number of people that come to ride, love to ride, you have to be responsible and think about your risk assessment for that club. And what is a risk assessment? And the risk assessment is, what exposure do you have to your people getting hurt? And how are you going to protect your people against threats to their safety? If you look up public safety, there is a whole host of articles about public safety, large scale, small scale. But I think there are three main things that clubs can start doing if they haven't already, to kind of think about their risk assessment. And the first thing that I think clubs need to think about doing is engaging in this cultural shift about safety. Before, we had to make sure our bikes were in good working order. We had to make sure our bikes were tuned up. I think probably every cycling club made it mandatory that you wore a helmet, right? That's not good enough anymore. And so now we have to think about things a little bit differently, and getting everyone on board about that cultural shift in safety might be a challenge. It might not be, but people in cycling clubs need to engage in that cultural shift about safety. The second thing I think clubs need to start doing is thinking about their safety protocols in terms of consistency. One of the things about risk assessment is that you don't try to get ready, you got to be ready. And so that consistency helps you with being ready. Does your club have a mask requirement? What is your safety plan if there is a mask requirement? What are your COVID exposure procedures? Bill, you and I go riding and I've been exposed, and I go to my club president and I say, I've got COVID. What's your club's plan to make sure that proper notification has gone out? And, what are you going to do to safeguard the club and that core group that was riding together? The third thing I think clubs need to start doing to tie a bow around the whole thing is that I think they really need to start implementing a health and safety officer for each club. And not just because, there's two types of cyclists, those that are going down and those that are been down. And I've been down and I know what a bad crash is. And I think that most clubs know how to handle their members that crash. But a health and safety officer or a health or wellness officer, that's going to be the person who is going to track trends. That's going to be the person who's going to be able to advise the club on, number infection rates that are getting dicey. They're the ones that are going to be able to say, no more rides. So those three things I think are what clubs need to start doing. Cultural shift, consistency, and a health and safety or health and wellness officer.
That says a lot. I think we don't look at that as a club. We figure, everybody else is on their own. And I know there was a club I want to say last year, they went on a ride, and if I remember the story correctly, someone came to ride with them, and I think they were COVID positive. They just didn't know it at the time. And kind of one of the things that kind of spins through my mind is, I know in New Jersey and New York, they are now actually they're actually now having people sign waivers before they go out and ride. The waiver does two things. One, it kind of helps with liability, and two, it also helps for contact tracing if something happens. And so, it's kind of interesting that that's kind of where we are now, that we need to kind of think about that. But let me ask this of you, Anastasia. So you ride, you run. What are you doing differently this year?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like Dr. Susan, I didn't ride at all last year. And I probably haven't seen the inside of a gym for about 17 months. And I just went back to swimming this week. I had my second swim today. And I had a lot of trepidation. And so knowing that I had to swim, I wasn't going to make a plan when I got to the pool. I made a plan before, I went to the gym. And so I have a plan. I'm consistent. I'm in and out. I bypass the locker room. I will dress with my swimsuit on when I get to the pool, put stuff on, and I'm out the door. I'm masked up the whole time. In terms of cycling, I agree with Dr. Susan 100%. I'm not here for big cycling groups. There is a core group of people. I've kept my bubble really, really small, and I'll probably ride with them. And they've kept their bubble small. And that was a commitment that we made to each other. As long as we were going to work out and we wanted to work out together, we kept our bubble small. And that's going to be my core group for cycling. But triathlon training is a little bit, when you're cycling in triathlon, you don't get to do a pace line anyway.
Right.
And so being able to social distance while triathlon training is actually preferred. So it's just about making a plan on your physical fitness. And that I think that's what's going to get you through, and consistency is going to get you through.
So let me ask this question, considering just life in general, what are some of your, I guess, best practices that you would tell somebody if they're going on a ride, let's say 5 people? Kind of walk us through, what do you think, what would you suggest from the time you meet up till the time you end? What would be kind of something that you would probably suggest? You talked about being in a small bubble. So,
well, I'm riding tomorrow. It's just 3 of us. And these are people that I've known for a really long time. But we have, the ICE information, in case of emergency information. If, something were to happen, it's COVID is just a different type of safety protocol. And so we're going to incorporate those standard safety protocols, but we're also going to stay, keep socially distanced, and we're going to mask up. I'm vaccinated, but I am always going to work on the assumption that no one is vaccinated. And so that's how I am going to approach small group rides, that no one is vaccinated. And I think that's how clubs need to approach it too. And let me just say something about the health and wellness officer. It doesn't have to be a physician. It could be a firefighter. It could be an EMT. It could be it could be a person. It could be a physician's assistant. It could be it could be a layperson, someone who is just going to be really dedicated to listening to Dr. Fauci or the CDC being able to, make timely reports or say, hey, listen, there's an uptick in infectious disease, infections. We need to shut this down immediately. So it doesn't have to be someone, high on the medical chain. It just needs to be someone who is going to be consistently watching the numbers and listening and reporting back.
We're kind of getting a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll kind of throw this out to you and Dr. Susan. And I don't know if there's an answer for this just yet, but basically, what are some of the statistics of cyclists with COVID? And what was the other question that was here? Social distancing within the group. I know one of the articles I did see that said basically for social distancing, a bike length is actually 6 feet, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I'll click over to some of the other stuff I'll show later on. But back to you, Dr. Susan and Anastasia, just kind of, is there any information about cycling yet, or is it still new, or still early?
I haven't seen any specific data about cycling, and I don't think they're racing much. Are they still, racing? Because they're close when, they can bunch up and get very close. They're working hard, they're breathing hard. So that data would be hard to get, because if you were to go to the hospital or nobody's going to ask you that question, and that data isn't going to be anywhere that somebody can find it later. Your occupation may be there, and all that other data, but your hobbies, what else you do, won't necessarily. That's going to be hard to find unless you're part of a big organization that publishes it. Anastasia, I don't know if you have any other ideas how that data would even be found.
It's not captured, like you said.
Yeah.
But in terms of, riding in a group, for us, as long, we're pretty distant from each other. As long as we can see each other and we're within yelling distance, we could be, half a block away from each other. And so that's how we're going to ride tomorrow. And I think that's how people need to approach cycling. Everyone, and I'm not going to get into the politics of mask wearing. Everybody is going to either wear a mask or they're not going to wear a mask. That is something that's the consistency part that I think each club has to address. And then at the end of the day, it's a personal decision that every cyclist is going to have to make. So yeah, it's going to be up to the club to protect you, and then it's going to be your responsibility to protect yourself as well.
That is good information. Like I said, I think, we just kind of need to kind of look at that. It is kind of a different place right now. I went out riding today by myself and I didn't even think about it. I didn't have a mask. I didn't stop, but I didn't even think about it. And so, a few weeks ago, like I said, I saw on Facebook a lot of the clubs were going out, and I was just kind of looking at the pictures. And I guess I'm also looking at the Major Taylor brand, and that is, we want to make sure that we do everything right. So, because people are looking, people are watching. Pam, you've got your hand up. You wanted to ask a question?
While we're waiting for Pam, I just want to make a comment that I think that ride leaders should feel very comfortable in saying someone can't ride if they don't have a mask, if that's going to be the rule of that ride.
Yes.
Or if you find that people are being inappropriate in any kind of way, which makes the ride unsafe. I mean, we would never let anybody ride in a group without a helmet.
Right.
That's like a no-brainer.
Right.
And we should look at this the same way if that's the rule that we want to have for our rides. It's not negotiable.
That's the cultural shift I think a lot of cycling clubs have to make. That, COVID, as far as I'm concerned, you correct me if I'm wrong, COVID's not going anywhere. It's going to be like the flu. And, to your point, we have to be able to, if your club is going to institute a mask requirement, then require it and say it and enforce it. Just like you would, like you said, no one's riding in a club without a helmet. No one's riding in a club without a mask. And so that's the cultural shift that needs to happen within the club.
Pam, you had a question?
I did. When that unthinkable happens, and it happened to me last year, I was in a cycling crash. And the person who, was with me at the time, did resuscitated me. With this whole, I guess I was concerned. I mean, I'm glad they did what they did, but in this time of COVID, should they put a mask? Can they breathe through the mask, or what happens in that? They're waiting for the EMTs to get there, and you react. I guess that's kind of a question for the doctor. What's the best protocol to do with that?
Are you talking about like CPR or something?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Well,
but you had that serious of an accident, and it's COVID time.
Yeah, people don't do mouth to mouth anymore. It's not the standard of care. Whether somebody gets close to you within the, beyond the 6 feet, helps you get up or, asks you how you are, I think that's still appropriate with a mask, to help you to do that. So I think helping somebody in an acute injury situation, you can still do quite well, even with proper precautions, one of which would be a mask. And even if someone was hurt, they can still, unless they had significant lung damage or lung injury or something, they should still be able to breathe okay with a mask on.
Okay. No, I was unconscious, so I kind of don't know what happened, but I know they said she resuscitated me. Yeah. But and I'm glad she did, but I'm like, my concern was for me and for her, because I think, she did what she felt was right at the time. How should we approach that? That's all.
Man, that is a great question. And it's kind of funny, in the back of my mind, I kind of had that thought, what happens? I mean, I've been on a few rides where people have gone down and, fortunately they haven't been out, but what is the protocol there? So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is kind of a legal assessment. And it's kind of a pleasure for me to bring this young lady on. She is my baby sister and is an awesome attorney. And so I just wanted her to talk a little bit about the legal assessment. Some clubs have waivers that they're asking people to sign before they ride. There was a question, where can you get it? I will share the waivers with you. And again, USA Cycling has a lot of the references that we're referring to. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my, I'm not even going to call her baby sister, to my sister, attorney Prashandra Gaston.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, brother. I'm going to call you brother for having me here. You know what? A lot of the information that you all have given is really good. The legal community, much like all of the communities, are still just kind of trying to figure this out and how COVID actually affects the legal community. I've heard about risk tonight. And that's kind of what I think from a legal perspective, what you think about as a club, what are the risks when you're still choosing to ride during a pandemic? So one, the club definitely takes a risk. You take a risk by saying to people, hey, we're open, we're still going to ride. That's your risk. But now how you start to mitigate that is you put in line those protocols, and they're not optional. So someone said earlier, just like you make it mandatory for people to wear a helmet when they ride, they must wear their mask. They must get a temperature check. They must sign a waiver. If they're coughing, if they're sneezing, running noses, all of those things, you have the right to say, you look ill. We would prefer you not ride today. And that needs to be something that is done every single time. If a person isn't willing to wear a mask, 6 feet, sign a waiver, they can't ride. And there can be no exceptions to that, because what happens is there probably will be a time someone comes out to ride, they're asymptomatic, they find out they have COVID. Now they tell brother, I was out on that ride last Saturday, I have COVID. Now he has the responsibility of informing the other riders that there's potential for exposure. And what if now the club wants to look at what your liability is? Well, in the law, there's definitely something that we call assumption of the risk, meaning, yes, it's a pandemic, but if you choose to go out and ride, you yourself take a certain risk when you make that decision, whether you wear a mask or not. Where the club comes in to protect itself is it's saying, okay, but on this day that they rode, we did everything possible, but for, actually have someone in there giving out COVID tests to ensue protocol, which will also be in line with CDC guidelines. And as long as you have that in place, that is going to give the club the protection it needs for situations like that, which is the importance for the consistency. There can be some people riding with a mask, some people who sign waivers haven't signed waivers, some people who got a temperature check, didn't get a temperature check. No, all of those things need to be done by everyone who's riding, and they need to be documented. The next part of that would be looking at your waiver. Now, I did get a copy of your waiver, and I had a chance to go through that. And here's the thing about the law. The law will have certain things in the law, and it says, okay, you think if you have a waiver, then that means the person signs the waiver, my liability is done. But the law doesn't look at it like that. The law says, well, yeah, they signed a waiver, but was it a good waiver? Was the waiver clear and concise in its message to the parties? Did the parties know, when I sign on this dotted line, this is what this means? So in the instance of COVID, it would be basically spelling out in your waiver, I on this day came here of my own free will, and I chose to participate in XYZ race or event or whatever the situation is. My temperature was this. I wore my mask. There were proper markings in place for people to remain 6 feet. And I have no symptoms that make me believe that I have COVID. And then it lays out from there, because if that issue ever were to go to court, and as an attorney, I'm always looking at if something can go to court. And let's just be clear, we're in an age where people file lawsuits for anything. Oh, they stepped on my foot, I'm going down and file a lawsuit. So just because someone files a lawsuit doesn't mean that the club has actually done anything wrong. But what I'm coming from is a position of how the club can put itself in a place to have everything in place. So if that instance comes, you're like, nope, here's our waiver, it's complete, it's concise, here's the signature, here's the date, here's the records from that day, this is what we did. And that way, you're in a position to defend against any of those types of claims. The idea of a waiver is something that I think it should already be done anyway, but I think definitely going forward, when you're talking about organized activities in the middle of a pandemic, that is going to become the standard. The type of mask people wear, that may even be something that the club wants to consider, and even looking at what other organizations are doing across the country to eliminate that. I mean, we know that vaccines are here now. People are getting vaccines. While they're not mandatory, we know that they're heading in that direction. And what does that mean for the club? Will the club then say, well, you can't even ride if you're not vaccinated, and whether or not you can ask people for proof of those vaccinations? So, I mean, and that can potentially get into a privacy issue for some people. But the basis of what's going on right now, which is your mask, your 6 feet, your temperature checks, and a standard waiver, those things cannot be compromised.
That is good stuff there. Again, like I said, my thought was, I'm not trying to scare anybody or anything like that. It was just, I know we are in a litigious society, and I just thought about a scenario Actually, on the USA website, there's actually scenarios. And I thought about, as a ride captain, I could be asymptomatic. And let's say Susan Doe comes out, she's heard about Major Taylor and she wanted to ride with us. And she comes and she and I are chatting. We're 5 to 6 feet away, but things happen. And maybe that week I find out that I'm actually COVID positive. Now, the fact that Susie Doe signed the waiver, we can use it as contact tracing, and I can go back and say, hey, just to let you know, member tested positive for COVID. You might want to go get tested. And then they may come back, because with COVID, it's not what happens, is how COVID affects you. And that's the one thing about COVID, is different for everybody. But they may come back and say, hey, I rode with your club. I wasn't around anybody else after that. And this is what happened. So again, we just want to just be safe. I'm not trying to stop anybody from riding or anything like that. By all means, I think one of the things that was said now might be something that will start being a part of rides, just like we do. If we're going to kick off at 8 o'clock, we tell everybody to get there 15 minutes early to do gear check, tires, tubes, water, whatnot. Now it might be and temperature check, just to make sure everybody's good before you head out. It's not a big thing. It's just one more step just to be safe. I don't really see where it's a big deal, but I mean, I'd rather be safe than sorry. This is a copy of the waiver that I believe Major Taylor, New Jersey is using. And again, it's just kind of basic laying out. Social distancing must be practiced, face coverings worn at all times to reduce the risk. Individuals who currently are within the past 14 days have experienced symptoms. So basically, their waiver is making sure that all sides are accountable. So if you've had symptoms in 14 days, they need to know. If anybody in the club has had symptoms in 14 days, they want to know that. Duty to self-monitor. Participants and volunteers agree to self-monitor and sign or monitor for signs or symptoms of COVID-19. Then there's the liability waiver to release of claims. And so we're not going to get into all of the legal jargon. This I'll make available, and also on the USA Cycling site, they actually have a copy of a waiver. But again, this is great information that you can use when you go on your club rides, and everybody signs it. And hopefully, we don't have a problem afterwards. This other document, which I thought was kind of cool, I don't know if you can see this one. Let's see. So basically 6 feet of a bike basically is about 6 feet apart, which is actually pretty cool. So as long as we're standing, with a bike in between us, we should feel relatively safe. And I thought that was kind of cool. Again, you have to assess the risk for yourself. We all want to ride, and, like Anastasia said, like Susan said, I haven't gone on any big rides. Last year, I think I rode by myself. This year, I've gone on one club ride with the Misfits. I actually met them at the end of the ride and caught up to them later. So you've got to do, again, what works best for you. And I think Anastasia said it best. Make the assumption that everybody that you come in contact with is, they haven't been vaccinated. So, but anyway, I hope that this has been helpful. I'm gonna go back to Dr. Susan and Anastasia and Attorney Gaston for final words. Let me unmute them. And I apologize for the hack.
I guess the final thoughts that I would have that I'd like to share with folks is that consistency is key. You can't be half on, half off. Consistency is key, and developing those protocols, enforcing those protocols, knowing what those protocols are is key. And one way that you can do that is incorporating the health and wellness officer that's going to help the club with its consistency.
Attorney Gaston, any closing thoughts?
You know what? I agree. Consistency is definitely key from a legal perspective, making sure that each and every time you have everyone signing in, you have everyone wearing their mask, and making sure that they're signing that waiver. So at the very least, you have those protocol in place if anything were to come up.
And Dr. Susan, any final words?
Yeah, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think that things will never get back to the way they were. I think that we're going to end up, if we're going to do large group activities, it's got to be done differently, because I don't think that that we would ever all be protected from COVID or something similar to COVID. I think that this is, a reflection of just what's changing with the climate, with the environment. I mean, things are different. And I think that, we have to get used to a new normal.
Mhm. Agreed.
Yeah, it's going to be a new normal. But at the end of the day, I'm asking everybody to be safe, to wear your mask, keep your family safe. Hey, and let's get out here and have some fun. I think Anastasia said best, you keep it in your bubble. If you're getting out here, I know some clubs here in Chicago, they don't really publish their rides anymore, just to kind of keep it simple. I know Derek and Hendon out of Major Taylor Iron Riders had mentioned that they meet at a bike shop. And so if 30 iron riders pull up, and there's 20 people at the bike shop, they all want to be a part of the ride. So right now we just need to be cognizant of that, and just be safe. I think we've kind of covered all the points. Again, I put in the chat the USA Cycling website for more information. It has a ton of resources on COVID. I think Anastasia's idea for a health officer, great idea. Just means, hey, you just need to bring a thermometer or whatever and stay on top of what's going on. And at the end of the day, hey, we continue to ride, and hopefully come 2022, when we have our national ride, things will be in a much better place. But at the end of the day, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was beneficial. Again, I recorded the meeting. I'll edit out our little hack, and I'll get this out to everybody so you can share with your club members. And again, we want to do everything decently in order, and everything that we do, we want to make sure that the major is proud. So I want to thank Anastasia Walker, Dr. Susan Rogers, and Attorney Krishandra Gaston for your time. I want to thank you, all my brothers and sisters of Major Taylor, for coming out. And I'm your boy, Brother Bill, National Leadership Council President. Hey, I've just got a passion for my people and our club and our brand. And thanks for coming out, and we'll get more information out to you later. All right. Everybody have a great evening. And again, I'll have this posted shortly. All right. Night, everybody.